This is a 7 News Election 2025 Beyond the Podium special presentation.
Virginia is just 1 week away from electing its first woman governor ever. Democrat Abigail Spanberger and Republican Winsome Earle-Sears are facing off for the top job in the Commonwealth. Now, the two candidates shared the stage in a heated debate about 2 weeks ago, but we had more questions and we wanted Virginians to hear from both sides. Since the spring, 7 News and our Sinclair sister stations have been working to secure one-on-one interviews with both campaigns. Those didn't happen after the Sears campaign declined an August debate that WJLA was part of. 7 News extended an invitation for both candidates to participate in a Sinclair gubernatorial forum. Neither campaign could agree on the same date and location, so Sinclair pivoted to a format that included pre-recorded questions from Virginians, which you will hear tonight. Eventually, the Earle-Sears campaign confirmed a date to sit down with 7 News. The Spanberger campaign declined, and our sister station in Lynchburg, WSET, made the same requests. And while they hadn't heard back from Earle-Sears at that time, they did have an interview date set with Spanberger. Now, to give Virginians a fair opportunity to hear from both candidates, WJLA and WSET joined forces to make it happen for Sinclair's 5 stations across the Commonwealth. But ultimately, the Spanberger campaign backed out of that WSET interview. Our colleague Pat Simon joins us now from Lynchburg.
Scott, I did reach out to the Spanberger campaign numerous times. They initially agreed to one interview date, but we could not make that. And then I told them that I would travel anywhere in the state to meet her for an interview. We did book another date in late September, but then after we asked for additional interview time for this forum, they declined.
Pat, I also made that same offer to travel or, if needed, conduct the interview over Zoom.
And Scott, I also offered to reinstate our original one-on-one format without audience questions or WJLA involvement. The Spanberger campaign still declined to move forward.
Thank you, Pat. So after months of efforts to include both candidates, tonight you will hear only from Republican nominee for governor, current Lieutenant Governor Winsome Earle-Sears. She got 60 seconds to answer each question. Lieutenant Governor, thanks for being here. We've got a series of questions for you, so we'll get right to it. Last week's debate made a lot of headlines, but one in particular that's raising questions about where you stand on gay rights. When your opponent said that you oppose gay marriage and that you think it's okay for someone to lose their job for being gay, you could be heard clearly saying to both points, that's not discrimination. Can you explain?
Yeah, when she was talking, I was thinking that I was saying I'm not discriminating. And that's what I wanted to say. But she was just going on, and I'm just thinking, that's not discriminating. I'm not discriminating. That's what I was thinking. And that's what I meant. But before, I had already answered the question where I had said, I'm not discriminating against anyone. I want everybody to have an equal opportunity.
If given the opportunity, would you outlaw same-sex marriage in Virginia?
Well, I think that's already going to the voters, and so we'll let the voters decide. I'm not planning on taking any of that up. My opponent probably has some things about that, but, you know, here's what the people have been asking me. They want to know, are you going to keep my taxes low? That's what I've been hearing. They like what we've been doing. We've returned over $9 billion to the people of Virginia. They want to keep as much of their hard-earned money in their own pockets. I'm going to keep doing that, whereas my opponent has already said, Abigail Spanberger said she is going to raise taxes. That's not going to fly in Virginia. And then, of course, I want to make sure that we continue to create jobs. And one way to do that is to make sure that we keep the right to work, which means that you're not forced, if you're going to take this job, you are forced to join a union. And if you're going to keep the job, you're going to be paying dues. I am pro-worker. I want liberty and I want freedom, and I think that that's what that's about.
Speaking of the economy, President Trump recently announced thousands of new federal layoffs, many of which are certain to impact Virginia families. Do you support the cuts?
Here's what I support. We need to get rid of the government shutdown. If we had just, 7 senators who are Democrats who came forward and said, we're going to keep federal workers working, then none of this would be happening. We wouldn't be talking about this right now. My opponent, on the other hand, Abigail Spanberger, all summer long has been running ads claiming that she loves federal workers more than anybody else. But let me tell you what love looks like. Love looks like keeping federal workers in their positions, able to get that paycheck. I believe last week was their last paycheck. And I'm a United States Marine Corps veteran. I was enlisted and we needed every dime. And yet we have our military who's working without getting paid because of the shutdown that she is partly responsible for. She can tell our two senators, because I believe we're down to needing 5 now, Senators Kaine and Warner, go do your job and get back to work. Get federal workers back to work.
But can I ask you real quickly, do you support President Trump's cuts?
I support whatever it takes to get Virginians back to work.
You have previously supported federal cuts by this White House. Are there programs or departments in Virginia's government that you believe should be eliminated or cut back? And can you be specific on any?
Well, as in everything, you want efficiency. I mean, businesses want efficiency in your own life. You make cuts to see what efficiencies look like. And so I don't think governments are any different. They're part of the cycle of doing business. But what we have done in Virginia is we've created jobs. I know what it feels like to lose a job. And as a matter of fact, to lose it very suddenly. It doesn't sit well with you because you're trying to figure out, what do I do next? So what we've done in Virginia, we've created jobs. We have over 250,000 jobs for anyone who wants them, and we've even added a layer of child care to bring even people back to work who had left the job market. Furthermore, we are bringing in new businesses. We've just announced Afton Scientific, for example, 200 new jobs. We could have had 800 jobs up here in Northern Virginia, but we couldn't get the Board of Supervisors of Fairfax County to agree with it. So we want people to go to work, and we've created an environment for them to take jobs.
But anything you would cut specifically?
I'm responsible for the state level.
As governor, switching topics here, would you instruct all Virginia state and local law enforcement to cooperate fully with ICE on immigration enforcement?
So I'm an immigrant to this great country, and what I want is opportunities for everyone. But we have to be safe. And what we have found is the number 3 MS-13 leader right here in Virginia, because we have been cooperating with the Trump administration. We have found over 4,000 criminals who are legally here, and they must leave. So they're in some form of deportation status, because we're talking about pedophiles and murderers and rapists, 4,000 of them. We don't want them in Virginia. And my opponent, Abigail Spanberger, voted for open borders, and so some of these who are criminals stream through. We didn't know who was coming across the border. There were child rapists who were coming across the border. Fentanyl came across the border, was killing, 5 Virginians every week because of my opponent. If she had stopped it at the border, we wouldn't be discussing deporting these 4,000 criminals who are legally here.
So ICE, would you tell locals to cooperate?
Well, we have to get them gone. And ICE needs the ability to get criminals who are illegally here out of Virginia.
During the debate, you supported an all-of-the-above energy policy, specifically mentioning nuclear power projects in southwestern Virginia. How would you bring those projects online, and are you at all concerned about safety for surrounding communities?
But of course, Scott, of course, as governor, I'm concerned about safety for everyone. Now, these nuclear reactors that we're talking about, they're small, modular. You know where they are? They're on our ships right now, in our largest naval base in the world. And by the way, the average age of those ships, guess what? They're about 22, 23, and we've not had any reports of that. We're not talking about Fukushima-type meltdowns. We don't build those kind of nuclear reactors anymore. And so we have the ability. It's in the study now with Wise University, and, the university at Wise. If we're able to make it work, then we're going to make a hub, an energy hub out there in the Southwest, all those jobs that we've lost in coal. So we can actually have clean coal oil, renewables, yes, nuclear, natural gas. We can do all of the above. We need that. And my opponent says only solar and wind. And by the way, she says she's going to get rid of oil and gas in Virginia. That's a nightmare for our economy.
Let's talk about another hot topic, which is data centers. Do you believe tax incentives for industries like data centers should be tied to measurable community reinvestment, for instance, energy infrastructure or environmental benchmarks?
Are we asking that of any other business? Are we asking that of any other business? What I do know is that there are places in Virginia that want data centers. If they want them, then let them have them. They're local governments making those decisions. I don't want to put mandates on local governments, not at all. I don't even want unfunded mandates. So what I'm saying is we're looking to see where the localities are that want them, and for those that want them, then those decisions are made by those who are elected locally, not by me. But I can tell you that data centers, they don't have the attendant problems that other businesses may have, because they're not having to build schools, they're not having to dig up the roads and add, wider roads. They're not having to dig up pipes and add more sewer capabilities, because they're just machines. So it seems to me that some places are telling me they're a net for them, because they could run the whole budget for the locality.
All right, one more question here before we take a break. Your campaign has been flooding the airwaves with ads highlighting the J. Jones text controversy. What will you do to bring down the political temperature in our state and encourage an end to violent rhetoric and over-the-top attacks on political opponents?
So, I, as an immigrant again to America, I have seen as a 10-year-old what it looks like when political parties fight each other, and then the rest of us get hit. And I've seen blood in the streets, tanks in the streets, people shot and killed by the opposite party and thrown in trucks and tanks. We can't have that in America. And so when my opponent, Abigail Spanberger, has said to her supporters, "Let your rage fuel you," what does she mean by that? She's running to be governor of our great Commonwealth. Let your rage fuel you? Abigail, what do you mean? Let rage, not anger, but rage, and fuel what? Fuel against whom? Have we not had enough violence, Abigail,
so how would you bring it down?
In America? My opponent is part of the problem, because she won't get rid of J. Jones, who has wanted violence against, quote unquote, breeding fascist little children and wanting the children of his political opponent killed. And she has herself not brought the temperature down, because Abigail has said herself, "Let your rage fuel you." So then what she wants us at each other's throats, and she comes in like a cavalry to save us, to rescue us.
Is there anything you personally would do to try and bring down this heat?
I'm already bringing it down, because I'm not the one who's advocating violence. I'm asking her to tell her supporters not to do that. And by the way, while she's at it, everywhere I go, her supporters, they're mean. And they shout wicked, evil things at me and at the folks who are there to support me. And those signs that say, Abigail, 8647, you are able to tell your supporters, that's not what we want in America. We don't want to 86 anyone.
And I think she has. But
and yet they show up every time that I show up. Right. And have you seen the wicked, mean things, the racist things they're saying against me?
Right,
Abigail, you can do something about that. These are your supporters, ma'am.
Coming up after the break, Republican gubernatorial nominee Winsome Earle-Sears answers questions on abortion and public safety. Welcome back. For those of you who are just joining us, we're spending a half hour with Winsome Earle-Sears, the Republican nominee for governor of Virginia. And in the following segment, the questions and her answers were taped on different days due to the Earle-Sears campaign moving the date on the night of our initial taping. Audience questions were submitted by local party committees, vetted by 7 News, and chosen randomly for this taping. The Democratic nominee, Abigail Spanberger's campaign, declined to participate. You have repeatedly called abortion murder, but in the debate last week, you said it's an issue that needs to be decided by Virginians. Are you saying that should you be elected, you'll take no action to restrict abortion access unless approved by voters or the legislature?
Well, when I talked about abortion, I was talking about the late-term abortion, which my opponent, Abigail Spanberger, wants. And that means we're talking about, she has the extreme position on abortion because she wants the baby to be aborted the hour that it could be born, even the very minute that it could be born. And then what do we do with the baby? I mean, this is a full-term baby that was aborted up at the very minute.
But that is illegal in Virginia.
But there is, if the constitutional amendment passes, then what do we do? Because it doesn't address it. Do we leave the baby on the table to die? What do we do? And so that's why I say my opponent has the extreme position, which I don't believe any Virginian wants. And so what my position is, let's come together as a Commonwealth and figure out what we want, and then we'll move forward. It's not my policy, it's what the people of Virginia want. What is their position?
In a radio interview with your fellow candidate, John Reed, a few years ago, the two of you were talking about abortion, and you said, quote, "Murder is murder, and one day it's going to be your turn." Mm-hmm. What did you mean by that?
Well, clearly we were talking about Ukraine. And what I was saying is that you can't talk about the Ukraine and what's happening there and then not talk about the late-term abortion. That's what I was talking about. And apparently folks have got it confused when I was clearly talking about Ukraine and late-term abortion, because you can't tell me that what happens with a full-term baby, what do we do with the baby? That's what I want to know. And by the way, we have, black women, we only make up 7% of the birthing population, the childbirthing, and yet we do 40% of the abortions. Who doesn't want us as black women to have our babies?
But whose turn is it going to be when you say it'll be your turn? Who's the you in that?
We're talking about the full-term baby.
Okay. You've said that you stand shoulder to shoulder with and support the Family Foundation when it comes to some social issues. They've published blog posts comparing IVF to child trafficking, accusing parents who use fertility treatments as being selfish. Are they right?
I think when it comes to IVF, there's so many parents who don't have the ability to have children, and so they turn to IVF. I've had folks in my family who have had that issue, and I'm not averse to it, but you do have to make provision for what happens with the cells that are still there.
Is it selfish then?
To do what?
To have IVF treatments, to have fertility treatments?
I wouldn't say that, no.
Would you support changes that require pre-trial detention for individuals who are charged with violent crimes, including domestic and intimate partner violence? And then how would you balance public safety versus due process?
You know, the one thing that we know about due process is in America, that's sacrosanct. As a matter of fact, in 2001, after I was elected, I carried a bill to protect us from the KKK. And the reason why we needed a new bill was because the law that we had had for 50 years said that the minute that you burn a cross on anyone's property, it's a prima facie case, meaning that we know right away you intend to terrorize so right away we've said they're terrorists without, any due process. And so one thing about America, there's always a court case somewhere and you need your day in court. So because of my carrying that bill now, we're protected from the KKK. Well, not just, of course, black people, but Jewish people, Catholic people. I tell you, I think even the KKK hate themselves. So I believe in due process. But if you're a criminal, then I think there has to be a way that we can get you off the streets. And, and if you're talking about no cash bail, we've seen what happens in New York.
Gotcha. We had some questions earlier from audience members that they taped. We've got those for you now.
Some argue that Virginia's regulatory environment, particularly around licensing, labor, and taxation, has made it less competitive compared to neighboring states. What steps would you take to make Virginia more attractive for small businesses and innovation while ensuring responsible governance?
So, of course, we have to have some regulation. But my philosophy is let government get out of my way so that I can do what needs to be done. And what we have been doing, and we're going to continue with me as governor, if I am so blessed to be able to serve the people of Virginia, we're going to continue getting rid of more regulation. And, you know, it's called the Administrative Act, and it takes about one whole year, about a year and a half actually, to get rid of one regulation. I've already identified where in the process in the executive branch as governor that I can make that process happen even quicker. And so it gives me, the law does, 60 days in order for my part to happen. I don't need 60 days to know that a regulation is not working and it's a job killer. So I think in 5 days I can do that. And the way that I'm going to do it, I'm going to go directly to the industry. I've already started doing that. I want them to tell me exactly what this regulation does and doesn't do.
Another viewer question here.
What role should the governor play in ensuring that all public schools, particularly those serving vulnerable populations, have the resources they need to help students succeed?
So it was when my father came to America with only $1.75. And by the way, he came 17 days before Dr. King gave his I Have a Dream speech. He needed money and he needed a good education. And so he took any job he could find and he put himself through school. And now he's comfortably retired. And so I know that a good education will lift everyone. And so what resources we have already been doing is we've increased teacher pay 18%. But when you have come through COVID, not COVID, but the response to COVID that Governor Ralph Northam had, where he shut down all the schools, although the private schools were open, so apparently COVID doesn't go to private schools, but the public schools were closed. The children, they had experience of anywhere from 2 to 3 year learning loss. And we have had, because we were the last to open, and by the way, my opponent, Abigail Spanberger, wanted to keep us out a whole nother semester. We can't have that. We immediately put kids back to school, and we've been working right now to make sure they have all the resources. We have had even tutoring. We've had tutoring that we've given.
All right, final question for you.
What is your position on the deployment of national troops into American cities, and under what conditions would you support such action in Virginia?
So as governor, I would be commander-in-chief, and you know, I'm a Marine, and so I understand military type operations. In Virginia, we don't need that because we know how to keep law and order. We are not soft in crime, as my opponent, Abigail Spanberger, is, because, again, she has already said if she's governor, she is going to make Virginia a sanctuary state. She voted to defund the police and get rid of their qualified immunity. That's why you would need the National Guard. We don't need that because we are here in our state. We have laws to protect us. You can't even talk about economic development without having law and order. She is again soft on crime because she has, in D.C., where D.C. was concerned when she was in Congress, she voted to decriminalize so many things, and you know, even President Biden vetoed that bill that she supported.
When we come back, Lieutenant Governor Winsome Earle-Sears will give her closing statement. Welcome back. For those of you who are just joining us, we are spending a half hour with Winsome Earle-Sears, the Republican nominee for governor of Virginia. The Democratic nominee, Abigail Spanberger's campaign, declined to participate. In a pre-recorded interview, Earle-Sears had 60 seconds to give her closing statement to Virginians.
Virginians, I thank you for listening. In my life, I have led a women's homeless shelter. I have led a men's prison ministry, did that for 2 years, one of the best things I've done with my life. And I've mopped the floors at a food pantry. So what I am about is I serve, and I've seen that so much in my life, in my home, my grandmother and others. And, you know, I'm also a Marine, and I have discovered that as a Marine, you do whatever needs to be done. It's your duty, and that's who I am. When I was in the Marine Corps, I was a journeyman electrician and a diesel mechanic, and I think I am the only lieutenant governor who can put on a pair of spikes and climb up those electrical poles and work on hot lines. So I know how to do this. I don't need on-the-job training because we've been doing the work. My opponent, Abigail Spanberger, has not. She's not been there when we've been creating all these jobs. And so I ask you for your support to be governor of our great Commonwealth of Virginia.
7 News thanks Winsome Earle-Sears and the audience members for participating, and thank you for watching. For more coverage of Virginia's elections, just scan the QR code that's on your screen. That'll take you to WJLA.com. I'm Scott Thuman. Have a good night.